It's Zach and Alicia back at it again. We're putting out a small little series of videos in celebration of our 10-year dating anniversary. We've been together for 10 years, dating for a little bit more than 5 of those years.
Married?
Oh, sorry.
We've been married for a little more than 5 of those years.
What did I say?
That we were together for 10, but dating for 5.
Oh, there we go. Yes. I don't know if we want to do a. We're just dropping some simple facts in light of being together for 10 years, but married for five. Married for 5. So I don't know if you want to recap the first 3 points we made.
Yes. Okay. So in our last video, we talked about putting God first. So both of you putting God first in your personal life and in your relationship, as well as being very best friends. And then also having one mindset. So going along the same direction, wanting the same things.
Yes. So our next ones are pretty simple, but I think really helpful. And the first one is patterns versus potential. This was kind of mine, so I guess I'll break it down. Patterns versus potential. I heard this from Steve Furtick, and it just made so much sense to me. A lot of the times we date according to potential. So we date somebody for the potential that they might have. Like this person has the potential to be someone great one day. Maybe they're not great right now, but they can be great one day. And here's the thing with that I think makes so much sense. The reality is everybody has potential. Everybody has potential. Like if we truly believe that we were created by God in his image, each of us has potential. But what he says we need to watch is the patterns. So meaning we need to notice this person's habits. How are they behaving? What are they doing? Versus just looking at who they could be. Also take note of who they are. Because I think we kind of easily lie to ourselves sometimes, especially if we want to be with that person. We're like, oh yeah, this person, like, sure, they have a problem with this, you know what I mean? Or yeah, sometimes they occasionally do this thing that's not necessarily bad, but I don't think that'll be a reality. Like, I think, they're going to give that thing up. And
you can make up any reason.
Yes.
I think what that really means is don't try to change the other person.
Okay. Yeah.
Look at them and accept who they are and don't try to change it. Don't think of what they could be.
There you go.
Or if they were this way, then it'd be a great relationship, or maybe I can change them into this person, and don't let someone else do that to you either.
That's a really good point. And especially depending on where the relationship is going. I like what you're saying is just date who you are, not who you want necessarily in that relationship. Do date who you want in actual reality. But in that relationship, make sure you're dating who that person is. Sometimes we're into a relationship and this is going to get deep, but we project on that person what we think they should be. So we're not actually dating them. We're dating a certain the idea of them. We're dating the idea of who they could be. And why that becomes an issue then is because then when they're not behaving in that proper mentality, then there's all types of frustrations and all types of disappointments because once again, who you're dating in your head is completely different than the person you're dating in reality, because you're dating based off of potential, not necessarily the person, their patterns, or who they are. It's a lot of it happens sometimes in our mentality. I think, it's good.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, second point.
Okay, the next point that we were going to talk about is boundaries.
Yeah.
You should have boundaries and be mindful of those boundaries. And there's all sorts of different boundaries that you can have as an individual. But I think a few of them, obviously, physical before the camera doesn't, you can't see that. But yeah, physical boundaries, but then also emotional boundaries. So if someone's being, verbally abusive to you, or they're cutting you down emotionally, or they're not respecting you as a person, that's a hard boundary.
Right. That
someone shouldn't cross. If someone loves you, they're not going to verbally abuse you, as well as, physical abuse. You know what I mean? That's a hard boundary. You need to have boundaries in your relationship. You need to know what you're comfortable with and you're not comfortable with, and be able to explain it to the other person and, stick to it and hold them to it.
Yeah, I think especially as Christians, we tend to highlight just the physical aspect of boundaries, like, where your boundaries are at sexually. But I think oftentimes we ignore some of the most primal, important ones, which is what you're suggesting: emotional, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse. You need to I think you have to set your limits. And this is where things get confusing, and it was, especially as Christians, because we're taught we need to forgive somebody. Well, how often do you forgive them? Well, Jesus was being nailed to a cross when he was forgiving his enemies. Yes, he was forgiving them, but notice he wasn't necessarily holding relationships with people that were toxic to the community. So I think even in his own sense, Jesus had 12 disciples. He set his boundaries on his innermost community because he didn't just want to allow anybody to come in and start affecting him emotionally, physically, and verbally. And you just want to make sure that you're setting those boundaries, I guess. Especially, maybe this person is okay with where we're at, like with our physical boundaries in our relationship, but how are they treating you emotionally, mentally? You need to make sure you're setting clear standards. Like, they do not talk to you that way. They use certain language around you. You need to make sure that you're being as specific as you could possibly be about those emotional, physical, and those mental needs. You need to make sure you're taking care of you, especially if you're going to spend the rest of your life with this person, and you really genuinely want to be with them. The last thing you want to be caught up in is a manipulative back and forth relationship because you don't understand your boundaries. You don't understand where you're going.
Which means that it's okay to have boundaries in marriage.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think a lot of people, when they focus on boundaries, they focus on, like, physical boundaries. And so they think that when you're married, like, no boundaries because you're literally one person. But it's okay to have boundaries if you're not comfortable with something.
Yeah, you need to make sure you're voicing that, because I read it said there's this book literally called Boundaries, written by two Christians. Two Christian psychologists, but they even talk about, even in marriage, like, it's healthy to establish, some key boundaries. And I think about it, like, your skin is one of their most basic boundaries that you have. Like, your outer skin is what protects you from external forces that may be trying to harm you or get in. So even within your relationship, you need to make sure that you're communicating clearly things that you feel aren't healthy. Or that may hurt you physically, mentally, emotionally, those types of things.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then our last point is know who you are and what you want. I think this is kind of your point.
I think that you should spend some time just getting to know who you are and figuring out what it is that you want. I think that it makes relationships so much easier when you know who you are and you know what you're looking for, and you're not swayed by other people's opinions or expectations of you, or what other people want to make you. Like, know who you are, be confident in who you are, be confident in what you want, and then that even helps you to know what you're looking for in a relationship.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Nothing will complicate your relationship more when you don't know who you are or what it is you want. Because then that person is going to try to maybe be something that you think you may want. But then if you don't even know what you want, it's just going to always be this back and forth limbo, causing, confusion and all sorts of things. So I think knowing who you are is key, I think, to start, setting up that platform for what it is you want, especially in a relationship. But if you don't know who you are yet, it gets complicated when you try to dive in deep into a relationship and hope that person helps you discover that for you. They may assist you, but it's all the responsibility for knowing who you are is ultimately upon, I think, you. Otherwise, that can really complicate things, and it can get really messy.
I just think that also gives you, like, a lot of confidence. Sure. Because if you know who you are as a person, what you like, what you don't like, what your mannerisms are, what you're okay with, and what you're looking for, it just helps so much, because it allows you to really filter through people.
Sure.
What you're okay with, what you're not, but it also makes you so much more confident, like, when you come to the table, because it's like, I know who I am, bro.
And I'm not sure I was planning to go in this direction, but that was some of the tension that I experienced when we were dating early on, is a lot of people had opinions about our relationship. And whether or not those were valid or invalid is besides the question, because the biggest thing that I was struggling with was, who am I and what is it do I clearly want? Because then you have to that'll make it easier to stifle through or not stifle, but I guess go through those voices, filter out those voices. There you go. What people are trying to speak into your relationship, or trying to talk to you about your relationship. When you're confident in who you are and what you want, like Alicia always is and has always been, it just makes it easier and clearer. And it rids you of so much more anxiety, because you know where you're going. Yeah. So I think that's huge.
Nice. So that was points. What was that? 4, 5, and 6?
Yes.
Yeah. Of our 10 tips for 10 years.
Yes.
Anyways, just things that we've learned or things that we think have helped us.
Mm-hmm.
So stay tuned for the last 4.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining along with us.
Thanks for listening. Once again, if you have any things you would like us to discuss, any ideas, make sure to comment, like, subscribe, reach out. We'll make it happen.
And if you want to hear more just about Zach personally, his ideas, all the things that he thinks about or what interests him or his take on things, he has his own podcast, PZ Does It, and he also has a blog, PZ Does It, that kind of goes along with his podcast at ZacharySurovec.com.
Yes.
So,
thank you guys for listening. Y'all are some real ones. Appreciate it.
Thanks.